3 things your elders should never do. Coming up now on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
Here we go.
Okay. Eldership. Now, I think we have to start this episode just with the requisite, maybe just clarification that not every church that's listening to this podcast has an elder structure. Some of you are Baptist churches that have a deacon board that kind of functions like an elder board.
Sometimes, yeah.
Or they don't, or maybe they don't. Some of you don't have anything at all. Some of you have an executive team. Some of you have a church council. Some of you have, a presbytery. I mean, not a presbytery, a session if you're Presbyterian. So, there's all kinds of governance structures out there. So Your mileage may vary, but the principles of the things we're talking about, I think, translate whether you have an elder-led model or not. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's it. We're talking most senior level oversight of the church with some plurality of people.
Yeah, think of the function, maybe more than the name. Don't get too caught up in the name. We're proponents of elder-led churches, but if that doesn't happen to be your situation, either by choice or just by consequence, that's okay. You can still take these principles and apply them. One other thing I want to mention before we dive into the 3 things, because there are 3 things that these elders should never do. Before we dive into that, one thing that your elders should do is sign up for the Church Checkup Challenge. How do you like that for a second?
That would be a good move.
Yeah. It'd be a good thing for you to do with your elders as a team to go through this together. It's a 7-day deal. It's free. No payment information required. Just go to malphursgroup.com/challenge. This is the last week that we are promoting this. So get in there. Hop on this. Make it happen.
malphursgroup.com/challenge. Sign up today. No credit card required. It's going to give you 7-day full access to the Healthy Churches Toolkit.
Yeah.
So you can browse around. You can get into some of the training, check out the resources, use all of the tools that we've got available there. And I think on an administrative side, for a lot of things, ministry side, your elders would find that valuable. Your church council, any staff people that you have, get them in there so they can check it out. After 7 days, love to see you become a subscriber. We are adding content to that monthly, in addition to workshops that we're holding.
We got some big stuff coming very soon.
It is not a static.
I can't wait to announce it. But we can't just yet.
Yeah,
that sounds like such a tease. Like they can, but they're choosing not to. Genuinely, at this point, it's at I can't announce it right now.
Yeah, but the point is, it's not a static website. Like, okay, there's these things, and if I need them, fine. But no, it's growing. It's constantly growing, adding things, and we do live monthly workshops. There's coaching available in there for you on an as-needed basis. You can schedule that. So awesome stuff in the toolkit. Definitely go over there, get a free week, look at it, and see how it can help your church and your ministry leaders.
Yep. All right. Awesome. Okay. So let's get into these 3 things that your elders, or whatever you call them, should never do.
Yeah. That we could have done more than 3 for sure. But
we could have done more than 3.
These are
you would have gotten maybe more angry with us if we got past these 3. We would have gotten more hate mail.
Some people will get mad. Some people won't like.
Some people will get mad at these 3. If we had gone past these 3,
it would have been
sure.
The probability of anger would have gone up for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. The first one is just getting in the weeds, and that might sound a little bit broad, but we're going to help hone this in a little bit. For the most part, a lot of times it's just not clear. I think there's a lack of defined job function for elders in a lot of churches, or for, again, whatever you call them or whatever you might have them do. It's not clearly defined a lot of times. There's not policies in place. There's not good onboarding. There's not good training. There's a lot of reasons why an elder board that are members of an elder team end up kind of getting outside of their lane, getting into things. And one of our other points will get a little more detailed into this, but elders should have actually a fairly limited function of, spiritual oversight of the church, big forward vision level decision making, and then, a few other things related to that. But too often we see elders in churches just really getting into the minutia of operations and functions of particular ministry areas, stepping on the toes sometimes of staff and volunteers. So get out of the weeds.
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to take a step back and think about the language that the New Testament uses, that Paul uses in the New Testament to describe this function or this role or this office, right? And there are a couple of words that typically get associated with this office. The first one is the word episkopos, which gets translated sometimes as bishop, sometimes gets translated as overseer. But in the same breath, like if you go to Titus 1, in the same breath that Paul is using the term episkopos, he also uses the other word, presbyteros, which is associated, always gets translated as elder. But at least that sort of hints that in Paul's mind, those terms are connected, and it's maybe the same office or the same function or the same role. And so that first word, episkopos, in overseer, means just that. It's providing, it's about management skill or capability and providing oversight to or managing the affairs of the church. So this is why we would say elders are ultimately responsible for the finances of the church, as well as the spiritual health of the church and so on. It doesn't mean that there can't be a finance team or a personnel team or some of these other teams that can help to manage it, but the accountability goes all the way and the oversight goes all the way up to the top. They're the ones for making sure that the church stays healthy and functioning well. And that's true for both the material things of the church, but also the spiritual things of the church. That second word, presbyteros, implies wisdom, and it even to some degree implies age, that you wouldn't have someone who's too young becoming an elder, because they need to have a little bit of life on them. Like they need to have maybe been punched in the teeth a little bit by life and learned how to get back up from that, to recover from that, to repent from sin. If you've never really been challenged, how do you know how you'll handle a challenge? So it's important that your elders be those in the church who have some life experience and know how to handle the slings and arrows that come with leadership and come with just life and living. And so what we're trying to avoid is if the role of an elder is to provide oversight, if that's a key word, oversight, I'm saying that I'm making the case that it's fundamentally impossible for an elder to be deep in the weeds in a particular ministry and also provide oversight to the ministry. And my case for this comes straight from Acts chapter 6, where you have the apostles, where this exact thing happens. There's some debate about whether or not the elders themselves, or whether or not the apostles themselves were actually conducting the daily distribution of the food to the widows. I think that they were, because I think when they say it wouldn't be right for us to wait on tables, in my view, implies that they had been doing this. But even if that weren't the case, even if they were just the ones sort of managing the daily distribution of the food, they said it would not be right for us to manage this ministry and neglect the ministry of the word and prayer. And so the focus there was, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game, AJ, but to some degree it is. You only have so much attention. And if I'm dedicating maximal attention or significant attention to a particular ministry within the church, no matter how good or important it is, what am I neglecting? And very often what happens when we're working with a team that has elders is that I see guys who are serving in 3 or 4 or 5 different ministries of the church, very passionate about those things, and they're not thinking about the big things. And if they're not thinking about the big things, who is? And usually the answer is no one.
Yeah.
And so they're neglecting their higher calling in order to devote time to an important, to some degree lesser calling. Not lesser in the kingdom, but just it's not what the calling of an elder is. If that makes sense. I've been going on and on. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Get a word in edgewise.
No, I think that's all good. That's all good. Yeah, the Acts piece is, that's really interesting. Not to get too sidetracked on whether they were the ones doing it or not. I think you could almost read it as though somebody was. It wasn't them, and it was somebody, and maybe the focus is more on, hold on, we actually need good qualified people to be doing this, because the ones that have been doing it obviously weren't doing a good job. They were showing favoritism and things. We need people that truly have a calling and will handle this rightly. Regardless, it still stands that the apostles and here, expanded to elders do have a particular function that they should be more staying in a lane on. And I think that's the big takeaway. We work with a lot of churches that people have varying views on this. We totally get that. In the end, it's your decision. It's not ours. We're going to make a recommendation. But I've certainly dealt with churches that they really did want elders to be part of leading ministries. And sometimes it almost comes across as almost an arbitrary division of the labor. And I'm like, well, is this the best way to have somebody leading in other areas of the church, where just because they're an elder, now they get assigned to something? Like, is that how we want to find the best leaders for particular ministry areas? Forsaking then perhaps calling and gifting and passion and all the things that might make somebody a better fit. So I think,
or they'll like misunderstand, I think, what's intended when Paul talks about that an elder should be able to teach, or that's even part of the role is teaching, to then say, okay, well then all of our elders need to be teaching a small group or a Sunday school class. Like, I don't know that that's a good idea. Not that they couldn't, on a rotation or certainly fill in, but to tether them to one specific small group or one specific Sunday school class actually negates their higher calling of being able to use that teaching ability to guard sound doctrine at the macro level of the church, which is more important than their ability to personally lead a group of 7 or 8 people in a small group. So I think it's a misapplication of the intent of that, which is to guard sound doctrine within the church. And it's just not possible to overlay the first century church context and the way those churches were run and structured in our own context. So I think you have to be looking for these principles and then applying them properly. And I think it's, in my view, and I know that people disagree with me on this, by the way, because I've had these conversations with churches that I've worked with. I think it's a misapplication of the principle to tether an elder to one specific class. I think that it misses out on their skill.
How much greater multiplication could we see if an elder able to teach was instead using that to teach others to teach, get some 2 Timothy 2:2 happening in here.
Yeah.
And we've got well-qualified people instructing and discipling and raising up other teachers. To me, that's a better use of their time and their skills and gifts.
Yeah. So don't hear me say, oh, they should never teach a class, or they should, never be involved with a small group or whatever. They should only go to board meetings and do nothing else. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about tethering them, kind of limiting them to one very narrow scope. I think it's probably a misapplication. The other thing that I want to say on this before we move on, and we'll move on to the next thing here, is that there are some churches that we work with, AJ, where the elders feel that just by virtue of the fact that they are an elder, that they have a right to have an opinion on everything that happens in the church. They have a right to talk about the music, or why I didn't like this song, or, they have a right to talk about, the children's ministry really ought to do this thing this way. And I don't want to bleed into the next point, but I'll just say, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. Part of being an elder is empowering the people who are beneath you. So focus on those higher level things, bigger picture vision things. Try not. It doesn't mean you can't have an opinion, but it doesn't mean that you're entitled to an opinion on everything, and that just because you have said opinion, that we all have to sort of stop, drop, and roll, based
Sure.
on what you're saying.
Yeah. I think there's an element of wisdom and humility to try to divorce yourself from your own personal preferences and that of just what is a good practice, what is good to move the church forward for, most people. And it's easy to, there's some personality in there that affects that. This is something that I try to remain very open with and not impose my personal preferences, certainly on any churches that we work with, but even in my own church and in other aspects of life, recognize what is just what my preference is versus what is good or right or best for most.
The elder who constrains himself to only speak when it's significant sounds much more wise than the elder who opines on every single thing that happens in the church. It's like inflation. The more you say, the less it's worth. And so, having the wisdom to go, I didn't love that, but saving it up for something you think is significant, and being thoughtful about that and go, is this something I really need to speak into? Or is this just a preference thing? And if it's just a preference thing, then, share it with your wife like a normal person,
Yeah.
You don't
like
have to
like you're supposed to have if you're an elder. Only one.
Yeah, that's right. Just like write it on a note. Like, why did he make that reference in the sermon? That is ridiculous. My church, my church sang a song at Christmas time that I thought was ridiculous, but I mostly kept that to myself and to my wife for the most part.
And you're not an elder, so
and I'm not an elder.
You would
But
not have been
even as fair, but even as not an elder, I'm like, it cheapens my opinions on other things, because the people in my church know what I do. If I were to give input on every single thing that I go, I want to do that, are they going to want to ask for my advice or not want to ask for my advice?
Yeah. My wife hears all my opinions about church. Few others do.
As she should, and that's okay. Save it for her.
All right. Our next one is what an elder should not do. An elder should not act unilaterally. In that, just as an individual, and you were kind of hinting into this even a little bit, Scott. An elder, you're going to say this better than me. I'll just maybe more so tee this up for you to speak into this more, because I like the way I've heard you phrase this numerous times, and I like how you explain it. But an elder, as an individual, should not be acting as a lone ranger anywhere in the church and does not have individual authority. An elder has authority within the context of the elder board, body, council team, whatever they are. Elders work together for things, not individually as, chiefs or single decision makers. I'm going to let you explain that better than me, Scott. But I think this is an important thing that probably a lot of people, maybe even pastors and elders, don't keep in their mind, that I am a part of something bigger than me. I have not been given carte blanche to go run roughshod over the church.
Yeah, I actually think you said it really well. I mean, so I think the phrasing I typically use is that an elder does not have any authority over any individual within the church, except when they act as a group.
Yeah, so, there you go.
So that authority is limited. It's constrained to acting as a group, and that's true even for the lead pastor. So the lead pastor only has authority over individual people in as much as the group, the elder team may have delegated certain types of authority to him, to say, make financial decisions up to a certain degree, or hire or fire certain positions up to a certain degree, greater or lesser degree. But the lead pastor even is a first among equals, and his power is limited to a certain degree, except when they operate within the group. So, and that's especially true for lay elders who aren't on staff. They can't just walk into a room and say, "I'm an elder here, so you all listen up." And there's some good reason for that. There's wisdom there, and there's also practicality. So from a practicality standpoint, a lot of churches that I work with that are moving to an elder model, one of the big fears they have among their staff is, oh no, am I going from having one boss to having 7 bosses?
Yeah.
So when I hear something from, elder, Jim, do I have to treat that the same as when I hear something from the lead pastor who is my direct supervisor? And the answer is no. Jim doesn't have authority over you in the same way that, Pastor Dan does. Like if Dan is your supervisor. So
this needs to be clearly documented, though. Like literally, This needs to be written. Yeah.
Right. So you can have a conversation with Jim, and Jim can ask you a question, or he can be like, "Hey, I liked that song you sang," or "Hey, that was a weird choice for Christmas," which is the thing that I wouldn't just say at my church. But beyond it just being his opinion, it doesn't mean anything. Unless the group gets together and they have a conversation and say, I really want to say what song we sang, AJ. Can I say it? I don't know if anyone's listening.
It's not important.
We sang a Christianized version of a secular song and the secular song is not a good song, or it's about adult themes. How about that? That's all I'll say.
We can talk about it again off air. I know it's back on your mind. You can vent it back to me after we're done recording, Scott. I'm sorry this is coming up for you, those of you listening.
Let's say the secular version of the song, it has adult themes, and they did change the words to it, but it still had in my mind, I'm going, this song has adult themes, and we're singing at Christmas. Anyways, that's my opinion. Now, if I'm not an elder at my church, but if I were, I could have brought that up and been like, hey, are we going to have a little chit chat about this song? And everybody else could have been like, Scott, you're overreacting. The words were changed. It was basically just the melody. You are overreacting. And I could have been like, all right, you're okay, fine. That's fine. Or they could have gone, hey, you know what? You're right. We should be more thoughtful about the songs we're singing. Maybe we don't do secular songs that have adult connotations in them.
Yeah, but again, that would have been a great conversation to have at an elder meeting, not one elder with the worship pastor.
With the worship pastor, exactly. I could have been annoyed by that, brought it up at the elder meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the wisdom part. The wisdom of the group goes, Scott, you're overreacting to this. It's just not that big of a deal. You need to let this one go. Or the wisdom of the group would say, hey, I do think that maybe this wasn't entirely appropriate. Let's make sure that in the future we're using some better prudential judgment, which doesn't mean that the set list has to get approved by the elders, by the way. It would just mean maybe a message that goes down to the worship department saying, hey, let's be thoughtful about what we're doing and maybe avoid something that might be construed in a negative way. So I'm only trying to bring this one up, AJ, because I was trying to bring up a personal example and I didn't want to call out anybody, any churches that I've worked with in the past. I'm trying to just point the mirror at old Scott Ball. But so the practicality standpoint is staff shouldn't have, or volunteer ministry leaders shouldn't have 7 bosses. They should have 1 boss. And the wisdom part comes from when you act as a team, you mute out anybody's individual preferences or pet peeves, to discern what is actually good advice for the church. If that makes sense.
Yeah. There's an element of wisdom that needs to be employed as well, to just even be aware, even casual conversations, because your position holds authority, and depending on your relationship with various people in the church, you just have got to be aware, especially when I'm at church and I'm having a conversation with people, they're seeing you as an elder. And so I just think you've got to manage your words and your thoughts. And because you could have accidental influence if maybe you're too casual with throwing out your thoughts and things. So
yeah, so think about like Acts 15, just to give a concrete example of this from the text. Acts 15, this is where they're debating whether or not new Christians needed to be circumcised. And also, I think they debated the food sacrificed to idols, I think also came up, correct?
I believe those were together. Yeah. They had opinions on those.
Yeah. And so you have Paul essentially calling Peter onto the carpet and going, you're adding to the gospel here, my friend. And you're being a bit of a hypocrite, actually. He more or less calls him a hypocrite. And Peter, who is humble, receives that, and they have the conversation, and they ultimately agree that that they don't need to be circumcised, but that they should avoid eating food sacrificed.
Yeah, it feels a little compromised. Like, we came to a compromise here amongst us. We can give a little bit, restrict some. I'm sure.
And I think Paul further clarifies this in his later writings, where he says, you know what, if eating this food sacrificed to idols makes someone feel as though they're worshiping that other god, then you should definitely not eat it.
That was like a stumbling block message. Yeah.
Right. Because I think that was actually the apostles' point when they came to this. It's like, some people are saying that when you're eating a food sacrificed to an idol, then consuming that meat is an act of idolatry in and of itself. In which case, actually, it is bad. If in your heart is an act of idolatry, then you shouldn't do it. It's like a matter of conscience issue. So, not to get too sidetracked.
Kind of fits in with what we're saying. As an elder, the way you act amongst the congregation members, it could affect somebody in various ways. We need to hold that with wisdom and handled rightly. So,
and which, by the way, there were Christians who were crucified for not choosing to do certain things that might be perceived as bowing down to other gods or to the emperor.
Tough decisions were made. Yeah. All right. Our third thing that elders should not do, and that is neglect spiritual care amongst the congregation. So we would hope and desire to see that this is an aspect that is, again, clearly articulated for in the function of elders, and that this is an area in which commonly a lot of elder boards will divide the work. But this is one of those higher level components of being an elder in overseeing the health and well-being of the body of Christ to provide spiritual care to the congregation. And so, yeah, maybe you could divide this up any number of ways. But and again, another reason why we're saying these first things that we're saying, don't overload our elders with things that would neglect them from kind of what we see in Acts 6, of these higher level things that they should be devoting more time to. One of them being spiritual care. We could probably go on a tangent on this because, how many times we've heard and people almost demanding sometimes their pastor be the one that visits them in a hospital. Or even, churches, this is a luxury position for sure, but, a care pastor, somebody this is like their full-time gig is just doing that. Personally, don't get too excited about those kinds of things that we would do that. I think care for the body should be happening within the body. But this is definitely I think a good alignment at the elder level to be providing this for the church.
Yeah. So, and we're like we do all things in the Malphurs group. We're trying to keep it in the text here. Paul uses the Greek word poimen, and actually Peter uses this word a lot to describe pastors or shepherds in the church, and we see this function connected to the role of an elder in places like Ephesians 20, when Paul is giving his farewell. I'm sorry, in Acts 20, he's giving this to the elders in Ephesus in Acts 20. Sorry, I misspoke. And in that, he's speaking to the elders, and he encourages them to keep watch over yourselves and all the flock. So he's implying this shepherding capacity to the eldership role. So I know it's a little bit like piecing these parts together, and we're all just doing our best to try and understand the role. But I think when you look at the Timothy passages and the Titus passages, as well as this address, as well as what Peter says, I don't think it's hard. I don't think you have to it's not like a magic eye thing where you have to kind of squint and look sideways to see that there is an intention that elders would be overseers, managing the affairs of the church, but also providing spiritual nourishment and care. And you need not look further than what Jesus says to Peter, there in Galilee after his resurrection, where when he's forgiving and restoring Peter, he tells him to feed my sheep. And so it's this call for care. So if in your church, the only person providing that care is the senior pastor, you're failing at understanding the biblical mandate for leadership, which is a plurality of shepherds providing care over the flock, both in terms of guarding sound doctrine, but also providing that comfort and compassion that is so necessary for people who have fallen into sin or are sick or are in a crisis. So, one practical piece of advice, AJ, that we give to churches is to be sure that you divide up your meetings, because what tends to happen, especially in churches where, and this is the majority of the churches we work with, have all male eldership, and the tendency among a group of guys is that for the meeting to very quickly devolve into business. And once the business discussion starts, you can't stop that train. So prayer is bookends of a business meeting. So I would encourage you to have two separate meetings. One where business is not allowed. That's simply focused on prayer for the church and studying the word together. So maybe there's an issue that you're trying to decide upon. how are we going to land on this cultural issue? Or we have a crisis in the church and we're trying to discern, what's our view on cessationism or something like that. Like spending time in the Word together, spending time praying for the church, for praying for families and so on, and separating that from the business of the church, what's going on with budgets and ministry performance and personnel issues and all of that. Have those meetings be separate. And it will lead to a much healthier church. Very rarely do I encounter a church where their elders are regularly praying and fasting, not just saying that they are, but really doing it, and it's dysfunctional. That's a rare thing.
Yeah, that's wise counsel. I think that's a good one. For us to finish up on. So 3 things elders shouldn't be doing: getting in the weeds, too much minutia detail on ministry function operations, acting unilaterally outside kind of the authority of the body collectively, and then neglecting a key element of care to the church, and that's maintaining spiritual care at the macro and down to the micro level amongst the congregation. So, yep, these are some good ones. A lot of other resources available for elder boards, developing healthy elder boards. We even have a course on that available, and the Healthy Churches Toolkit. And you can get that at malfirsgroup.com. You can sign up for the toolkit there. And if you want to participate in the church checkup challenge, go to malfirsgroup.com/challenge. Gets you into the toolkit 7 days free. And you're going to get the benefit also of 7 days of emails from us with just 5-minute activities each day to help measure the current health and well-being of your church and talk about some good application points as well. So a couple of action points for you. You have some reading, Scott?
Yeah, for those of you who like books, I would recommend actually not just to promote the thing, but in the toolkit, we have a really good training on healthy board leadership, where we get into a lot of the stuff we've talked about today on the podcast, but some practical implications and applications of how to build that out. But some other resources that you don't need a subscription for, but you can just hop on Amazon and grab from our ministry here. The book Being Leaders by Aubrey Malfirst is focused more specifically on you as the individual, like you being a leader and developing yourself as a leader. The other book that's really applicable here would be Leading Leaders. This is a book specifically on boards, empowering church boards for ministry excellence is the subtitle, and it's excellent. The half of the book, AJ, half of it, I think the main content ends on page 120 or something like that, somewhere around there. And then there's another 100 plus pages of appendices. And those appendices, by the way, are in the toolkit. So if you want to get them in the book form, you can get them in the book form. But if you get it in the toolkit, you can actually access those appendices.
Yeah.
Download them that way.
Yeah. Worksheets, evaluations. Yeah. PDFs, spreadsheets, Word docs, various forms. So
Yep.
There you go. This was episode 275 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. So today's show notes are over at malfirsgroup.com/275. We are glad.
It's a really good article, if I do say so myself.
You can scroll down and see who authored that one. If you can't guess, definitely go check that out. We're glad you're with us today. We'll see you again next week.